First of all, this is going to be the biggest release of Connectology know-how into the wild to date.
Hello and welcome to the Connectology podcast. Here, Roadnight Taylor's influential team of elite connection specialists and their expert guests help you to better understand distribution and transmission network connections and how to acquire them faster, for less cost and at lower risk.
Hello and welcome to this unusual edition of the Connectology podcast series, because this is a Connectology podcast without a connectologist, and Laura was absolutely mortified at my suggestion that I was going to do this. But before you all click your stop button or go back to whatever you would be doing, let me very quickly explain, and this is going to be a very short podcast, what I'm doing and why. So this podcast is essentially a trail for an upcoming Connectology webinar on feasibility studies, and we are going to have to ram an awful lot into that hour of webinar, and I wanted to do a number of things here. First of all, this is going to be the biggest release of Connectology know-how into the wild to date, and so it was really important to me to make sure that, first of all, that we got as many of the right people on the webinar, so that everybody gets the most out of it, and also to save an awful lot of time on the day. We got to cram in, as I said, a lot into an hour, and also those of you who have been on our webinars already would know that they're very interactive, and so whilst we need to go through an awful lot of content, we also need to have plenty of time in order to and fro with the audience, which is, I think, what makes them so great. So I very much needed to hit the ground running on the day, which has been penciled in for the 1st of June, but do sign up for the Connectologist. We'll put the link in the description. That's the newsletter, which comes out about once a month, to find out when that and all of our other webinars are going to be scheduled for, and also so that you can catch up with all the other sort of podcasts and explainers, all the other extraordinary content that the Connectologists produce. So what I say now, I won't need to say on the day. So why are we doing the webinar? First of all, last time I checked, the acceptance rate, and this is purely distribution, by the way. So this upcoming webinar is about feasibility studies for large-scale connections into the distribution networks. And last time I checked, the acceptance rate of connection offers at high voltage and extra high voltage was below 20%. And conversely, Roadnight Taylor's Connectologists were achieving at the time some 80% success rate for our clients. And so this does suggest that there would be real value in some of Pete and Philip's know-how being disseminated into the community. Essentially, I kind of flip that around and see that as a failure rate across the developer community of over 80%. And that represents a significant waste of time and resource within the developer community. It's also a waste of their money. And the opportunity cost of chasing after these non-opportunities is actually finding real genuine opportunities and investing the time chasing down landowners, getting them signed up and getting cracking on with the planning work. So we would far rather that the community was focusing on the right sites from the outset. And really importantly, every one of those applications that shouldn't have been made because it was either an application on the wrong part of the network, or every bit as bad, it was the wrong application on the right part of the network, and each is as bad as the other. It represents a burden on those within the DNO community, so particularly the system planners, who are massively resource constrained, massively overworked. And we need them as a community to be focusing on the right projects where they can provide a connection which is going to take us to where we as a community need to go. The last thing that I think any of us want is their time being wasted on essentially inappropriate applications. So moving on, we here at Roadnight Taylor have a finite resource. We think it's in everyone's interest that developers have greater capability to do more of the feasibility work for themselves, so that they're better sifting and filtering through those kind of potential opportunities, so that then when they do go to a grid consultant, then actually they're not wasting time and money by putting sites that are not going to work. So who are going to be the experts on the day of the webinar? I'm going to be joined by, and I'm not an expert, but I'm going to be joined by Pete Aston and Philip Bale, who are responsible for the majority of the distribution level feasibility studies here at Roadnight Taylor. So very quickly introduce them now so I don't have to on the day. Pete Aston was Head of System Planning at WPD, as is Enged now, at WPD across all 4 of the licence areas. So he had overall responsibility for some 500 connection offers going out each year for connecting at high voltage and extra high voltage. And in addition to that, he was also responsible for the rollout of active network management at WPD once it became business as usual across all licence areas, and had the responsibility for the relationship with National Grid at that transmission distribution boundary, which I'm sure most of you on this will know is absolutely fundamental to feasibility. And also, I think many of you would agree that WPD, the way that they ran those statement of works, Appendix G, project progression mechanisms, has been and remains the best of all the network operators. No offence to the other 5. And Philip Bale was Head of System Planning for WPD's East Midlands licence area. Importantly, Philip also spent 5.5 years within the network innovation team at WPD, looking for ways of connecting more particularly low carbon technologies to the grid. And during that time, he led the project that included the very first deployment of active network management at WPD. And WPD were sort of the leading pioneers in that regard. So, hopefully that kind of sets the scene for these two, as well as all the extraordinary work that they've done securing many gigawatts across many connections projects here at Roadnight Taylor. Will kind of set the scene for somebody worth listening to, worth you and or your colleagues, friends and family to tuning into on that 1st of June webinar to gain some insight from you that hopefully will give you an edge. So what we're going to do on the day, on the webinar, is a step-by-step guide to exactly what the connectologist here would do. And this kind of goes up the expertise curve, or at least as far as we can go up the expertise curve in an hour, which obviously is going to be limited. But what we are going to do is signpost all of the publicly available data sets and resources that the connectologists would access, so that you know where to go. So really there should be something for everyone, from the very least experienced at the bottom of the learning curve, so that they can pre-screen sites before sending them on, all the way up to development directors, so they can better manage and understand the grid consultants that they're using, so they can challenge those grid consultants and interpret what they're saying, and ultimately to get the best from them. So that the webinar is going to be for everyone who has any remit that Connections touches, from an intern charged with site finding to a CEO of a substantial developer. And so the way that we're going to run it is step-by-step slides for half an hour, an interactive Q&A for half an hour. So do bring along your questions. And we really look forward to you being on there. So real quick, we're just so thrilled that so many of you are listening to and watching and reading the content that the Connectologists produce. And the amazing feedback that we've had from so many of you it means so much to the Connectologists. And some of the content, so for example, one of the podcasts has already been downloaded nearly 600 times. And that just means so much to us, given we're in such a tiny niche. So thanks for listening and taking the time to be a member of the Connectologist audience. It definitely makes it worth their time, effort, and the sacrifice that they do put in. But more of you are now actually sort of liking and sharing the content. And this is really important, because when you do that, you are going from being a member of the Connectology audience to being a member of the Connectology community. By identifying yourself as a member of the Connectology community, as opposed to just the audience, you're putting your weight behind them, and you're helping them to topple more barriers to connections. When you remove the barrier for one connection, then you're removing the barrier for all connections that otherwise be tripped up by the same policy or belief within the network operator or interpretation of the regulations, whatever it might be, like pushing over dominoes. So wherever you find some Connectology content, please, please, please like it, share it, send it on to colleagues, and it would absolutely mean the world to the team here. So thank you very much, and really look forward to seeing you on the feasibility study webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Connectology podcast. If you found it helpful, please share it with any of your colleagues or connections you think may be interested. And please do subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. You can find out more about our services at roadnighttaylor.co.uk, link in the description, where you can also sign up to our free Connectology newsletter for more news and thought leadership in network connections. If, during this podcast, you found yourself wondering what it would be like to have a Roadnight Taylor Connectologist in your life, please do email laura@roadnighttaylor.co.uk to find out how their game-changing skills and insight can change the game for you too.